It's Thanksgiving week already, believe it or not. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, the Packers lose 3 straight games, and some fans are starting to blame Aaron Rodgers' girlfriend Olivia Munn. Hint, it's not her fault. The world reacts to the terrorist attacks in Paris and Mali. A new poll shows Ben Carson leading the Republican field in Wisconsin, with Marco Rubio and Donald Trump tied for second. Insurance giant United Healthcare suggests that it might pull out of the Obamacare exchanges. And the state legislature approves legislation to reform the state's campaign finance laws. But we start with a debate over Syrian refugees. Even in the wake of the Paris attacks, President Obama doubled down on his plans to settle 10,000 Syrian refugees here, a move that drew quick opposition from more than 30 governors. While Obama and his allies accused critics of being un-American, xenophobic, and of being afraid of widows and orphans, an overwhelming bipartisan majority in the House voted to tighten the screening process for those refugees. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Mikel Holt, Wisconsin Policy Research Institute President Mike Nichols, defense attorney Dan Adams, and the managing editor of RightWisconsin.com, Collin Roth. Scott Walker among the governors to say, let's have a halt on the refugees, right or wrong?
Right, and this is a false choice that's being offered, that we can either take the refugees or we don't take them at all. And what I'd like to see, what I think Americans would like to see from President Obama is just some leadership. Come out and say, listen, I mean, people have a lot of anxiety, people have a lot of fear in the wake of these terrorist attacks. I don't know, and I think most Americans don't know what the process is for screening refugees. Explain it to them. Explain it to us what goes into vetting refugees and how we do it from failed states like places like Syria, where there is no government to cross-check. And come out and maybe there are some things that can be considered in terms of enhancing the security to counter this very deadly threat.
Politically, polls would suggest that only about 28% of Americans favor the resettlement plan as is. As I said, overwhelming bipartisan veto-proof majority in the House of Representatives. Why is President Obama choosing to die on this hill politically? Why is he digging in on this particular issue?
I really wish I knew the answer to that, because it doesn't seem like an obvious thing for him to do.
Okay, Mikel Holt.
Because he's a student of United States history, and this is supposed to be this beacon of light. You know, maybe you're right that of the 28%, they don't know what the vetting process is. These refugees will already have to jump through hoops. And what Congress is now proposing is insanely impossible.
Insanely impossible. I mean, insanely impossible.
You already have to go through the FBI, you have to go through several federal agencies in order to get into the country.
So you think it is absolutely inconceivable that anybody might game this system?
I think it's inconceivable that we have laws in place now to stop any terrorists from getting in the country. Why don't we do this for everybody? What about all these Europeans coming here? What about the Boston bombers? Did they get into the country legally through the vetting process? You can't stop this.
Well, you bring this up.
There was less scrutiny for them
but they
than they're offering for the
okay,
Syrians.
but let's talk about this, because their parents came here. You're talking about the Boston Marathon bombers. You're going to represent them up. Their parents came here on a tourist visa, but then they applied for asylum. They came in through that process, and then they became terrorists. Back in 2013, ABC News did this big in-depth investigation where they found out that, in fact, some Iraqi terrorists had, in fact, gamed the refugee system and had been relocated in Kentucky.
Can that happen
and as
today?
a result, well, that's the question. So is it illegitimate for Congress to say, wait,
I think people's
let's
fears are
pause?
justifiable.
Okay, well,
people's fears are
you just said
justifiable.
they were crazy.
What I'm saying is that there is a vetting process already in place. It's almost inconceivable that some terrorists could slip through.
Is this crazy? Is this unfair to ask for a pause, as Paul Ryan and members of Congress have done?
Well, no, clearly it should be a pause. Nobody's saying that America shouldn't welcome folks who are persecuted regardless of the country they're from or what their religious identity is. But I think it's common sense at this point in time, after a terrorist did pose as a refugee to enter Europe and was part of the attacks in Paris, to sit back and understand, get a little bit better understanding, as Collin suggested, of exactly how this process works. It's a pause. It's not saying no forever.
I actually agree with Collin Roth. I think if the president would come out and explain exactly what the current procedures are to vet these people, that anxiety, that initial reaction of, oh, geez, this is really bad would probably fade away. If there needs to be a pause for an extra hurdle, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. But listen, this is Thanksgiving week. We're remembering all week about this country's heritage as being a place for religious and political refugees. We need to open our borders to these people. They're being persecuted in the worst way possible.
We need to open the borders for some people. And I guess here's the question. The President of the United States could have, could have been a leader. He could have been somebody who said, okay, we understand your legitimate concerns. We understand that we are fighting a different war. We are fighting a war against terrorists who will try to use our freedoms against us, who will try to infiltrate this country. And let me assure you, this is what we are doing now, but we are going to be redoubling our efforts. Here's what we're going to be doing. And again, help unite, help establish credibility. Instead, the president decided to make this into a partisan, snarky attack on his critics.
The end solution here is to crush ISIS,
yes.
period.
Well,
and so we won't have any more refugee crises.
Again, I guess part of the problem is that when the French started bombing ISIS, and we were told that the United States had given them these high-value targets, a lot of people began saying, well, if we knew they were high-value targets, why have they not been bombed? And the answer is because this country has not really been trying to crush ISIS.
But it's not just ISIS.
Yeah,
it's Assad, too. Right. And that's, I mean, as many of these refugees are coming from escaping ISIS, they're also escaping Assad, who now, because of the president's reluctance to enforce his red line, looks like he's going to be there to stay.
Yeah, I am not anti-refugee, but I am skeptical of government, and we have lived through a period in which government has shown its incompetence, has shown its arrogance, has made promises it can't live up to. I mean, this is the government that gave us healthcare.gov, that gave us the IRS scandal, that gave us the VA scandal. I think it is reasonable for people to say, before we put the public at risk, let's make sure that we have our act in order. What has your glass half full? What has your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you are first.
Well, my glass is half full because a new Marquette poll has a black man leading the state's Republican presidential sweepstakes. My glass is half empty because that same poll suggests a black man whose policies are out of touch with reality is leading in the state's Republican presidential sweepstakes.
Mike Nichols.
The Census Bureau was wrong. Wisconsin is not the 11th highest taxing state in the country, according to the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance. Unfortunately, we're still 15th. The glass is still mostly empty.
Dan Adams.
Well, my glass is half full because Democrats in the legislature have figured out that advocating against government wastefulness and crony capitalism, exemplified by the WEDC's shortcomings, is a strong issue for the party. My glass is half empty because the local Democrats haven't learned this lesson. Milwaukee County Board doubled down in support of Supervisor Theo Lipscomb's wasteful pet project to save the Estabrook Dam, despite overwhelming fiscal and environmental reasons to tear it down.
Collin Roth.
My glass is half full because Speaker Paul Ryan and Republicans in Congress actually threaded the needle and staked out a strong, smart, and defensible position on pausing the Syrian refugee program for enhanced screening. It's half empty because Donald Trump appears intent on ruining this position by talking about registering and tracking all Muslims.
Well, my glass is half empty because it snowed this week, and it's half full because it's Wisconsin and my snowblower started up the first time. Next on Sunday Insight, the future of the education reform that began here in Milwaukee. A landmark for one of the nation's most watched education reforms. Last week, supporters celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Milwaukee School Choice Program. That program was initially passed back in 1990 with an unusual coalition that featured Republican Governor Tommy Thompson and Milwaukee Democrat Polly Williams. Today, more than 30,000 students participate in the program. So looking back, has it been a success, Michael Holt?
Well, it's been a success. I think it's grown in ways that many of us who were there at the beginning.
Right. You were there at the beginning.
And I was there. I was one of Polly Williams' lieutenants. Incidentally, and for the record, the first time we started talking about a voucher program after the governor's proposal was with the superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools.
Right.
He put this on the table. He saw that some of these small schools, Bruce Guadalupe, Harambe, Urban Day, were educating poor black children when NPS could not. Now just read that on your right, Wisconsin.
But go back to this, and this was a bipartisan coalition, and rural Republican governor, urban Democrat Polly Williams. Whatever happened to that bipartisan coalition? Because I don't see any Milwaukee Democrats that are in favor of school choice, even though it's a much bigger deal than it was back in 99.
Most of them are controlled by the teachers union, and they were pimp slapped into silence. I mean, we all know that. You know, the reality is, without Republicans, without that coalition, we wouldn't have this program today.
Okay, so has it been a success 25 years later, looking back on it?
Higher graduation rates, higher numbers of kids who are actually going to college, who are persevering in college, for a lot less money. Vouchers at the high school level of $7,800, thousands of dollars more in public spending in MPS. In addition, I would argue that MPS is stronger because of the fact that they have competition from choice. You can look at the rise of charter schools, which are public schools, and have gained actually some surprising acceptance in recent weeks in MPS, and I think part of that is due to the competition that exists because of the choice program in Milwaukee.
Dan Adams.
Well, I hate to be the downer for this issue because I actually do support choice. I'm one of the few Democrats that do. We still don't have an apples-to-apples report card that will compare schools against each other, and we know that there are a lot of choice schools that aren't performing well.
That's coming
we
in a
hope
year or so.
it's been promised again and again.
We know how many, I'm in favor of accountability, but we also know how many MPS schools would have 0% proficiency rates on reading. So
we should hold them accountable. We should hold the school choice and the charter schools.
Okay, Collin Roth.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the success of the program is most crystallized in the demand for it. You know, you're talking about there's close to 30,000 students in the program. That's a lot of parents who've made that choice, and that's one of the best selling points is that there are people who want to be in this program.
But the extraordinary thing about this is, you know, here's the principle, that no one should be forced to go to a failing school. Nobody should be compelled to go to a school where nobody is learning to read. We've provided an alternative system. And, you know, the struggles of this, when you go back to 25 years, the bureaucratic challenges, the political challenges, the legal challenges have been extraordinary. So the success is something that I think that we shouldn't lose sight of. On the other hand, this collapse of this coalition, the bipartisan coalition that began it, is truly unfortunate. Now, you may not want to hear it, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you go first.
Well, mine is to State Representative Mandela Barnes. The next time you decide to jack up a reporter for asking you a question about one of your votes, make sure nobody is filming the exchange.
Mike Nichols.
For Senator Ron Johnson, you're losing and foreign policy looms large. Talk about your opponent's lone wolf opposition to the Patriot Act and whether you, like every other senator in the Senate at that time, would have voted in favor.
Dan Adams.
Well, to Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke, perhaps wait until the blood of terrorism victims is dry before suggesting the GOP exploit their victimization for political gain. Yeah, you did that. Not good.
Collin Roth.
Here's some advice for everyone. In the debate over terrorism, saying, quote, all Muslims isn't helpful, but neither is saying, quote, Islam has nothing to do with it. Let's all be honest about what we're up against instead of sounding like a bunch of dolts.
Well, to the local social justice warriors, if you want to win friends and influence people, you might want to lay off the disruptions of Christmas carols by middle school kids. It is not working out for you. Next on Sunday Insight, the latest fight between Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abele and Sheriff David Clarke. It's not exactly news that Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abele doesn't much like Sheriff David Clarke. The two have frequently clashed, and last year Abele spent more than $200,000 of his own money in a failed effort to defeat the outspoken African-American sheriff. Last week, Abele lashed out again at Clarke, criticizing him for recent comments about blacks and drug dealers, and vetoed a $4 million appropriation for the sheriff's department. But on Thursday, the county board overrode Abele's veto by a vote of 15-1 with one abstention. If it hadn't been linked to an unrelated issue, it would have been 17-0. What's this about? You're a big Abele supporter.
I am a supporter.
I mean, this county board does not like Sheriff Clarke, but they obviously dislike Chris Abele even more.
Well, they saw it as an opportunity to attack Abele, and there's the unfortunate congruence of the $4 million for the arena and the $4 million here. I'm kind of taken aback by conservatives and moderates like to advocate for government acting more efficiently, doing more with less. Well, here Abele is saying, Sheriff Clarke, do more with less, like every other one of my departments.
Except
and
this was a
will run
this was actually a screw you veto, wasn't it? Because
I don't
it was
think so.
create
No, I
Okay,
think he's asked more of every department, including the House of Corrections, which he's taken over and run more efficiently and effectively
Did Abele
since taking
think
it from
that he was going to divide the progressives and liberals on the county board by going after the conservative sheriff? Did he think by writing that op-ed piece and citing the incendiary language that somehow he was going to drive a wedge between progressives?
If he did, then he didn't know exactly what Abele derangement syndrome, how strong it is on the county board.
Okay,
They
well
saw it and rejected
that
it.
is true. I mean, you know, Chris Abele's running for re-election, and he's going to be, you know, he's obviously the favorite. He doesn't have a single supporter on the Milwaukee County board, as far as I can tell.
No, and that's kind of stunning.
Yeah.
But I will agree to the extent that if Abele would have focused on just the policy issue of the sheriff spending one quarter of the levy in the county, and in a county where, you know, there are no unincorporated areas that don't have other law enforcement, that is a valid public policy issue that conservatives can be concerned about having accountability for spending.
But he didn't.
But he didn't. But he veered off into some other issues that he shouldn't have.
Okay, Collin.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of baffling that in his veto message, he he mentioned the Clarke's comments, which just set up. But
is he trying to gin up support on the left for all of that? What was your take on that? That he would.
This was really kind of funny. This was soap opera, political soap opera. You know, one of the things.
And it keeps ending the same way, and Abele hasn't figured that out.
Yeah, you know, because I read the Ed Op commentary as well, and you know, there's a lot of black folks because of the sheriff's comments about Black Lives Matter, some other things he said about racist police, etc. There's a lot of black people who turn away from the sheriff, but then are pulled back to supporting him because anytime a black person, no matter how conservative, is attacked, black folks tend to rally behind him. So Abele needs to just stick with the issues, and I think he would. Okay, but since he's rich, I guess it doesn't make any difference.
You mentioned the phrase, Abele derangement syndrome, but how does Chris Abele, how has he managed to alienate, I'm not a fan of the county board, but he has nobody on this county board that votes with him on these things anymore? None? Zero?
I think there's 3 or 4 that are swing, depending on whether they're feeling like they have to do the right thing or whether they need to play to the cheap seats. I think he's got a political issue, and he needs to be able to express what he's done over the last 4 years and divide it from politics, because that's his brand.
I think the key is somebody's got to get that guy a tie. What is it you don't get? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
What I don't get is the real reason behind Paul Ryan's demand for a presidential plan to defeat terrorism. Truth is, you can't eliminate terrorism. You can only contain it, whether it originates in France or in the United States.
Mike Nichols.
What I don't get is how, if the presidential election were held today in Wisconsin, an avowed Democratic socialist, Bernie Sanders, would actually beat a relatively moderate, conservative U.S. Senator like Marco Rubio, a socialist, in the White House with the support of Wisconsinites. Amazing.
Dan Adams.
I don't get why Chris Larson was raising money with Kenosha Casino Project advocates last week. Larson only won his state Senate seat in 2010 because the Potawatomis spent oodles of money trashing his opponent Jeff Plaley. Think Larson's trading tribes?
Collin Roth.
What I don't get is why, after more than a year of bombing ISIS, there were still critical targets for the French to bomb in the de facto ISIS capital of Raqqa.
Well, with Black Friday just a few days away, I don't get why the state legislature hasn't repealed its dumb minimum markup law that prevents Wisconsinites from getting the same bargains as consumers in the rest of the country. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week, but first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
My winner, terrorism. The attack on Paris has some folks building bomb shelters and stocking assault weapons. Okay, folks, this isn't an episode of The Living Dead. My loser, President Obama, who finds himself cast as a villain for trying to lead victims of terrorism towards that beacon of freedom and justice some still call America.
Mike Nichols.
The U.S. Secretary of Labor told Wisconsin it should raise its minimum wage. There would be some winners, but there would be far too many losers. A WPRI analysis shows that if the wage were increased to $10.10, between 12 and 55,000 Wisconsinites would lose their jobs. There are better ways to help folks who don't make enough money.
Dan Adams.
My winner, the venerable research organization, the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance, who discovered Wisconsin's tax burden on individual income compared to other states was being misreported. We're actually doing much better than previously thought. My losers, those who think tax rates alone equal economic destiny. Clearly, regulatory and tax burdens are important, but job creation is better aided by maintaining an educated, skilled, and creative workforce that will help build new enterprises.
Collin Roth.
Well, my winner this week is Paul Ryan, who deftly handled the Syrian refugee issue in the House and forged a veto-proof bipartisan coalition in the face of the president. My loser this week is President Obama and his commitment to a failing foreign policy. ISIS is not the JV. ISIS is not contained. ISIS needs to be crushed.
Well, my loser, American colleges, overpriced, underperforming, and now besieged by protests from whiny, entitled snowflakes. My advice, stand up to the PC bullies before parents begin to ask whether you are really worth that ridiculously inflated tuition bill. My winner, the USS Milwaukee and its crew. Wisconsin made, Milwaukee proud. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Thanks for joining us and join me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week and a great Thanksgiving.